Hey everybody, welcome back to TK Tennis. And this is the very late response to the French Open final and Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz's extraordinary 5-set match. So I wanted to ask the question, did Sinner lose the match or did Alcaraz win the match? It's a little bit of a complicated question, but maybe not as much as you would think. So no taking away anything from Carlos. What an extraordinary match. And he was just a beast in the biggest points. There's no doubt about that. And you could clearly say he deserved to win that match. And I'm not going to say he didn't deserve to win that match. I just think that Sinner may have lost that match. Well, obviously he did lose the match. He had 3 match points, but did he really do anything that wrong? Maybe a little bit, but let's go through it. So before we get into that, I want to mention that my assessment before the French Open was that Carlos had the advantage, but in this case, Sinner could win this match compared to the Italian Open finals in Rome, where I suggested that it was very unlikely that Sinner was going to win that match. He had a chance, of course, but not really much of one. The way I saw the court conditions in Rome, I just didn't see that being really viable compared to the French Open, where the court conditions had much better surface in terms of footwork, and it was a lot less slippery. And that means that evened out Carlos's advantage that he has on slippery surfaces. As the court is pretty grippy, Carlos has less of an advantage, and it favors Sinner. Not really favors Sinner, but equals it out. When they both have really good footwork, it's pretty equal. When there's fantastic footwork, like on a hard court, then I think it favors Sinner. And this matchup, in my mind, if they're playing fantastic and great tennis and they're in form and in shape, obviously everything else being equal, I think it really comes down to court surface and court conditions. So with that said, I did predict Alcaraz to win this match as well, but I thought there was a really good chance Sinner could win it. And that almost happened. And I'm going to argue that should have happened and that Sinner lost the match. And it's not just what you think in those 3 match points that he had when Carlos was serving. It was throughout the entirety of the match. So congratulations to Carlos. He earned it, and he stayed in it. But make no mistake, even though it was on clay, which was astounding because clearly Carlos has an advantage, Sinner did lose that match. No doubt in my mind that he lost that match. Not for lack of effort. That is for certain. It's just what I talked about going into this match, that Sinner was going to have to serve. Number one, he's going to have to serve much better than he did against Novak or much better than he did in Rome. And he did not. He served, statistics wouldn't show he serves absolutely horrible, but he served as bad as you can serve in such a big match. And he still had an opportunity to win that match. So what do I mean by that? He had very few aces. I forget the exact ace count. But most importantly, there's sort of a flaw in the coaching strategy here too, or communicating with Jannik during the match, is that he could not buy a first serve or an ace whenever it mattered most. It just wasn't happening for him. And most importantly on that fact, he was missing every serve that he tried to hit an ace on or anything remotely close to the lines. He always missed them long. Sometimes wide, of course, depending on where it was. But for the most part, all his misses were long. And normally in tennis, you'd rather miss long than short into the net. But if it's a trend and it continues to happen like it did in that match, where he was constantly hitting it long and just by a few inches, 2 inches, 6 inches, he could not buy an important serve when it mattered. And that has to come down to a little bit of coaching, and he has to make some adjustments. If you continue to hit the ball long, you have to snap a little bit more. You have to be a little bit more aggressive, and you just basically have to change how you're aiming. And that, I don't know if didn't mention it from his box, but I would have liked to have seen him hit a couple of first serves rather in the net after missing so many long, because he had to make that adjustment because he was under pressure. And in those tiebreakers that he lost, so he won the first tiebreaker but lost the other 2, and you just can't be missing first serves. If you're constantly hitting second serves against Carlos, boy, what a rough day you're going to make it. And yet he still had a chance to win that match. So that's my thoughts on the serving. And you can tell, obviously, he had a chance to close it out. In that game here, he closed out the match, I think it was 5-4, where he had a chance to serve out the match. If I'm not mistaken, I didn't look at the stats again. I didn't look at the match again. I think he only made one first serve, or maybe missed them all. And if he did make one, I think it was sort of in the middle of the box, and it wasn't going for anything special. So he had a chance to serve it out, but of course he was serving so poorly. Never mind being under that much pressure. That's a recipe for having what happened happen, meaning giving Carlos a chance to come back. And of course, in the tiebreak was just the second and third tiebreak was, of course, a mess as well. So that's the first point I want to make. How else did Jannik lose that match? Well, he lost it also because of his ground strokes. And you might say, what do you mean? He was hitting the ball incredibly well, and he was hitting great ground strokes. But comparatively to Carlos, his shots were falling short onto the service line much too often. He was giving Carlos an opportunity to really line up and hit his huge shots, and that's strictly from hitting the ball short. When you compare it to how deep, especially in the big points, how deep Carlos was hitting the ball with weight and RPMs, and that Sinner couldn't match that, and he would continue to hit it short. So while he was hitting it really hard, and they were both slugging it out, and the points looked amazing, every time I saw one of those points happening, and that includes all 3 break points, go back and watch the match, you're going to see the depth of shot on Carlos's ball was much more consistently deep than with Jannik. And it's those 2 factors that I think Jannik actually lost that match. You can say, yeah, he should have won one of those 3 break points, but that happens frequently where a server is down love 40 and comes back to win the match. In the men's game, the men are so good. And yes, there were 2 points where Jannik could have closed out that match, and he hit, I think it was 2 shots into the net. But Carlos was a machine on those 3 points. You could see he wasn't going to miss. He left it all on the line. He played his best tennis there. So in that respect, Carlos won that match. But overall, Carlos played about as well as his ceiling is. So Paul Anaquin has mentioned that, Carlos has a higher ceiling than Jannik, but Jannik's floor is much higher than Carlos's floor. I think that's garbage. I don't believe that whatsoever. I think the ceiling on these guys is about equally as high. If Jannik is playing his best tennis and Carlos is playing his best tennis, which in this match, when it mattered most and throughout most of the match, I think Carlos played his ceiling, and I don't think Jannik was playing at his ceiling. And yet Jannik still almost won that match on the least favorable surface. So the whole myth of Carlos having a higher ceiling, I don't buy it. I think it's just a talking point that the media likes to use, and people like to regurgitate that, believing it's true. It's nonsense, and I don't think you should be repeating it because I don't buy it whatsoever. Both of these guys are incredible, as good as we've probably ever seen. A lot of people saying this match was better than any of the matches we've seen the big 3 play. Maybe. Certainly in ground strokes, I think you can make that argument. But in all-around quality of play, I don't think you can say that. I think you can certainly say that in overall ground stroke, offensive ground stroke quality. I don't think we've ever witnessed something that high quality when it comes to offensive ground stroke quality, and even drop shot quality of things of that nature, and some of the touch shots maybe as good as ever. But overall play, it was an incredible match, one of the best ever. Would I say it's the best ever? That's hard to say, so I won't go there. So what does that mean for Wimbledon? So I'm going to give you my all too early prediction on Wimbledon, and this very well may change because I don't know the factors yet. I don't know the weather. I don't know how Jannik's going to respond. And to say that these 2 are going to meet in the final at Wimbledon seems probable, right? If they continue on this path, there's a very good chance these 2 could meet, but it's too early to say. So I'm not going to give any sort of assessment for Wimbledon. I'm just thinking going into Wimbledon at the moment, based on current knowledge, that it's likely that I would favor Sinner to win Wimbledon as of right now. And the reason is pretty simple. As close as that match was, and you could still say that Carlos is going to be better on a slippery surface, and grass, of course, is a slippery surface, and that is an advantage for Carlos. But as of right now, Jannik's playing incredible. The ball's going to be bouncing lower. That favors Jannik, and his ground strokes are going to be able to penetrate. Carlos on clay is able to get some of those miraculous shots back from Jannik on clay that he would have no chance on grass doing or on hard court, because the ball just does not slow up. And it's hard to see on TV. If you've never played on red clay, which most Americans haven't played on red clay, it is incredible how much easier the game is to play on red clay, because when the ball bounces, it slows down considerably. Now, of course, their ball doesn't slow down as much as a recreational player's, but at their level, the ball still slows down dramatically, loses an incredible amount of momentum on red clay, much more so than on gray or green slate clay that they use in America. That's very slippery and it slides. You know, people say, you know, green clay and red clay, they play similar. They don't. They are dramatically different in the ball height, how it bounces, your footwork, and the ball speed after the ball bounces and the loss of momentum. So a lot of those shots that Jannik hit that Carlos could get back, he's not going to get back at Wimbledon. The ball is going to be more in Jannik's strike zone. That also applies for Carlos as well. So it's not I think it's a negative for Carlos, but it's an advantage for Jannik. And depending on the court conditions at Wimbledon, you know, there's court conditions early in the tournament when it's all grass and it's very slippery. And then there's the conditions as the tournament wears on and the grass turns into pretty much dirt, right? And it gets much more, it's a lot less slippery. So as of right now, I think Jannik is the favorite to win Wimbledon. I don't think there'll be a hangover for Jannik. You talk about a class act. The difference between Sabalenka losing and Jannik losing, it's just stunning to see the difference in, you know, and you can give credit to Jannik. There are very few people. There's no way I could have that much grace and class. It's just stunning at someone of his age to have that amount of perspective. And while it hurt to be able to come right into the media and answer questions raw and with his true feelings, but also knowing that he's just going to be able, and that's sort of a lesson that people like Iga Swiatek needs to learn, is that you're better off when you lose just being open, letting it out, getting it out of your system and moving on, versus, you know, Sabalenka blaming it on herself and her bad play and undermining Coco. And it's not necessarily that Sabalenka was, you know, she says she's just being truthful and she's just being honest. She wants to be. Being a bitch or being an asshole or just being an undecent human being is not a good look, even if you are being truthful. There's a way to be truthful and respectful. And that is something that a Belarusian like Sabalenka clearly doesn't understand. It's just not in their culture. They think there's a sort of mindset of being truthful is honest, and that's good, and this is just who I am, sort of like the Daniel Collins approach. It just means you're not a nice human being. You're just a bad human being, and you show your worst of yourself when you lose. And it's disgusting. I think she's a pig on how she acted, and I know that's harsh, but listen, I'm not on Tennis Channel. I'm not a commentator on any sort of media channel. These are raw thoughts. I think she acted like a pig. Her behavior was disgusting. Her attitude, her words, her disrespect for the sport, to her opponent, and everything else. She should get slammed by the media. And if she can handle that and she's fine with that, so be it. That's her culture and that's who she wants to be as a person, as a human being. So be it. But that's, in my world, in my thought, you know, that just speaks to your lack of perspective and culture and decency. And I could go on, and that's it. But compared to Jannik, that girl needs to take some lessons. It needs to look at how much better it is, not only for yourself and how you're portrayed to other people, but it's better for you to be respectful, to let it out in a respectful manner, to be contrite, and to move on, versus just being a sore loser. That's what I can't stand the most. You could have the most beautiful game in the world and be, quote, exciting, which she doesn't have either of those things, and I still wouldn't like you, because I judge people first and foremost on their character and their personality and then their integrity. And when it comes to arena, No way, not my cup of tea. And also when it comes to people like Iga, who also she's super polite and a nice person when she wins, but when she loses, she can just sort of bottle it up and hold it in. And you're better off just giving your opponent respect. And that could be towards someone like Ostapenko, when she loses to Ostapenko all the time. Just give your opponent props. Say she kicked my ass, which Iga did recently. She did. But that's going to be better for you long term, not just how you're portrayed in the media. It's just actually going to be better in your best self-interest as you move forward in your career. So I know I went off on a tangent. Those are my thoughts regarding all those topics. Congratulations to Carlos. You certainly earned it in many respects. But at the same time, that was a lost opportunity from Jannik. He knows it. I think most people know it. Some Carlos fans may think that's sour grapes. No, I respect the heck out of Carlos. He is a class act. And while people give me grief saying, because I don't really love Carlos's game in terms of his stroke mechanics, and I call him a cyborg, he's still incredible for the sport. I just think Jannik is much more of an appealing player, and they are both incredible sportsmen and class acts. The worst thing that could happen here to both Carlos, not financially, to Carlos and Jannik, is if Carlos goes on a run and constantly dominates Jannik. That's not a good rivalry. That's not good for the sport. It'll be great for Carlos's, financial well-being. But I think as tennis fans, we all hope that that doesn't happen. I don't think it will, but I think it could, where Carlos wins 3/4 of the matches against Jannik. Overall, long term, who's going to win more Grand Slams? That's a tough call. I think Jannik, in terms of pure talent and ability, probably maybe a little bit may have a chance. And because more tournaments are played on hard court than they are on slippery surfaces in general. Well, there's 2 on hard court, right? And there's Jannik has shown he can win. Basically, it's almost shown he can win on clay. If he can win on grass, then I think that'll be put the rest. And I think Sinner has a chance to have more Grand Slams than Carlos. But the problem with both of them is I just don't know if either of their bodies can hold up. From Carlos's perspective, he's such a counterpuncher, and he has so much effort that goes into covering the court like he does. I think over time his body could break down, but I said the same thing about Nadal, and he persevered much longer than I expected. And when it comes to Jannik, he also has a very physical game like Carlos does. Maybe not as much because he has a little bit more natural reach and he's a little bit smoother with his motion. But he's also, he's skinny, which is actually good for tennis, right? You don't have a lot of weight and compounding weight on your bones and your joints. But we've all seen it with Jannik. These guys are both young, I think 23 and 22 or 22 and 21. I think they both should be concerned about their durability long-term physically. And I think they both need to do and be careful about how much tennis they play, even if it means getting fined by not playing some tournaments. If these guys want to have a career until they're 30, I think they're going to have to be careful how they manage their bodies. So that's it. That's my thoughts. I believe Sinner lost that match a little bit more than Carlos won that match. And that's not just because I favor Sinner. That's my objective view on that match in that incredible French Open final. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next Ace. And if there's any topics you want me to cover, please mention them in the comments. I'm pretty active in the comments, and I always like to find interesting topics to talk about regarding tennis. So let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next Ace. And let's see what happens at Wimbledon.